So I am 22 years old. I don't have much knowledge about finances and stuff as I still live at home as I'm at university. I do however pay my parents about £300 a month rent, I pay my own phone plan, buy material stuff I want or need, pay out for other services like for music or whatever, and try to put as much as I can in savings whilst still keeping enough in my main account for day-to-day purchases. Currently, I am saving up for driving lessons and hope that if I pass decently, I can use some of my savings towards getting a car. I'm in my final year of uni, so I'll be done and able to work full-time when all this happens. I also decided to get a credit card so I can learn how to manage credit wisely and build some up. My credit score is good for someone of my age and circumstance, but obviously it's nothing great in comparison for other stuff. I should point out that at most I only plan on using this card with a total adding up to £100. I've stuck to that so far and only actually used it twice, with these purchases only adding up to £80, and I paid it off quickly. I do not plan on exceeding my limit anytime soon, as I've heard far too many horror stories of people just using their credit card too much cause it was handy and getting into debt. The only people I disclose this to was my dad, as my mom has the tendency to blab to my brother and sister-in-law, both 28. She happened to overhear us talking one day, and before I knew it, my brother and sister-in-law got wind and asked me if they could use it. They both admitted they had debt spurred on by excessive credit card use and thought that since I basically had nothing owed on mine, it was free money. I told them quite politely that I was really uncomfortable with that idea and that I would owe the money and I can't magic up that kind of money. Things went quiet until a few days later they both turned up at the house. They were nice to start with, but basically started demanding I let them use the card, and they tried to manipulate my mother into guilting me into doing it. I got really angry, and when my brother said I owe it to them because they used to babysit me up until a couple of years ago, I laughed in their faces and walked out. When I came home, I learned they tried to manipulate my dad and he kicked them both out. My mother then tried and he told her to go too, and she is currently staying with my brother and Sil. The only person on my side is my dad, who tells me they're all trying to take me for a ride and they're trying to manipulate me cause I'm young and they think I'm vulnerable. My brother, sister-in-law and mom on the other hand think it isn't a big deal letting someone else use my card. It's really messing with my head, and I just want everyone to stop being in an argument. My husband and I, both in our early 30s, have been together for over a decade and made the decision to not have kids. I like kids, I have nieces and nephews, we just don't want them for our own reasons. He had a vasectomy, which only a few people know about. Our families are aware we don't want kids, as they've asked this before during different major life events, our wedding for instance. We recently bought a 3-bedroom home with a nice yard in a nice area. Excited to show our new home to family and friends, major upgrade to our previous home, we hosted a housewarming. During the party, one of my sibling-in-laws, Alex, made a few indirect comments about all this space, and kids would love it in our house, etc. Eventually they asked point blank when we were having kids. I made a light-hearted joke about it, which is my go-to for this question. Oh, well, I like sushi too much to have to give it up for a pregnancy. Plus not drinking for pregnancy and breastfeeding? No thanks. I tried to make it very light-hearted and laugh it off. Most people just laughed along. That seemed to anger Alex, and I was told children are a joy, and a good mother puts her kids before everything else. I agreed, children are a joy, I like spending time with the nieces and nephews. And obviously I can't be a good mom if I chose sushi over kids, so I just won't be a mom, paraphrased. Still trying to brush it off in a gentle way, because I'm not trying to start a fight by telling them to stop asking in front of everyone, because I know my tone will be seen as rude and abrasive. We move on. But Alex is still annoyed and making little comments in their group about how flippant I am about it and how when it finally happens, then I'll understand. My husband heard this and jokingly said, well, if she gets pregnant, that'll be a problem for the divorce lawyers. That seemed to piss them off more, but they stopped. With holidays coming up, we have not been invited to Alex's usual Halloween bonfire. When husband spoke to his parents, they told him Alex was annoyed we were so careless and callous about our child-free status and to say what we did, and they realized we had taken permanent steps to ensure we never had kids. That we know they had to do if to have kids, etc. And we are AHs to just not care. I feel bad because they did do if and lots of fertility treatments to have their kids. And even then they still had a few miscarriages. I can't imagine wanting kids and struggling to have them and then deal with miscarriages. But at the same time, I'm so tired of justifying living my life how I want. I feel terrible my joke was taken the way it was and that I hurt my IELTS. I truly never meant for that to happen. After the bonfire this weekend, we will be reaching out to have a heart-to-heart, if they'll accept it. Either way, I'll be apologizing for hurting their feelings, let them know I love their kids and them. But I will also be firmly putting down any further attempts to discuss our child-free status, if the conversation is about changing our minds. I have not told them our reasons for being child-free, so I think perhaps if they are willing to listen, I'll explain them and hopefully the conversation can be constructive. My son Simon, he is 16, moved out of the room he used to share with his little brother and got his own room a few months back. Ever since, he's been complaining about his mom barging in without knocking and interrupting his sleep and studying. Sometimes when he's changing, I know that she's his mother, but he says he's got his own room and has a job and is learning to become an independent adult, but doesn't feel like his privacy is being respected even when that's his mom. He says he's not a kid anymore and is entitled to at least get a knock on the door before she comes in. He was getting tired of her not listening to him, so he came to me and said, "Dad, you need to help me set some clear boundaries with Mom." So I spoke to her about her need to knock before entering Simon's room. She was like, "What? And no, we're family, not strangers. Do you really expect me to foolishly knock on the door 5 times a day? That's ridiculous. Also, the knocks doors in their own home?" I told her my family, for instance. She made a face, then went on a rant about how my family hate each other's and the way they treat each other's like they were strangers is shameful. I told her family or strangers, it's about respecting one's privacy. We had an argument about it and I told her if she wasn't going to stop with the barging and refuse to knock on the door before entering, then our son will get a lock. She did it again at 11 p.m. She barged in when our son was asleep. He jumped up because he got scared. Once he told me this, I told him to go ahead and get a lock and pay for it with his own money. There was literally no other way. My wife saw it and got upset, and my brother was visiting when she was raising her voice at me if I really went ahead and got a lock for Simon despite her disapproval, and said that I caught her off guard and it's not okay. Because this teaches our children that they can manipulate one parent into doing what they want. I told her that Simon got the lock, not me, and I already warned her about the possibility of him getting a lock, because he was getting tired of her boundary crossing. So she should have expected this outcome. She mentioned the same above points in her defense and said locks mean secrets and that's not good. My brother was sitting watching while she was complaining. She began chewing him out when he asked her to let Simon keep the lock and said it wasn't a big deal. She stopped talking to me and Simon till we removed the lock, but I've no intentions on doing that. I don't want to go into tons of details. You need to know that for the last 7 years I have not been at home. And during this time my 2 brothers and sisters were still living there. While I was at home, our stepfather abused us mentally and physically. We lived in crappy houses that were covered in real garbage, including animal feces, absolutely everywhere. I haven't heard from my little sister since May. I'm pretty sure she was told to cut contact with all of us. We are her older siblings. My second sister, after my younger sister, is overweight and has spinal problems and has to diet and see a specialist she is not taken to. I told the social worker that I wanted to check on them because they were in a sorry state and because I'm not sure if there is still any physical or psychological abuse going on in the house. This genuinely worries me. I told them what happened to us, hitting walls, throwing things at us, swearing, belittling our character, etc. And told them repeatedly that I really just want to know what my younger brothers and sisters are not the same living conditions as they were. My husband supported me during the call and agreed that it was the right thing to do. All my siblings discussed this beforehand, except for my older sister, who moved out before things got bad, and the 2 who live in the house. We all agreed that this would at least let them know they were being watched and we weren't just disappointed in them, and maybe my mother and SD would keep the house clean nose, etc. CPS contacted my mother very quickly. Much faster than I expected. I mean within 3 hours. After that, my older sister, who lives far away and hasn't contacted me for months. Calls and she gets mad at me because she knows I called. I didn't deny anything and just said, if they have nothing to hide, then they have nothing to worry about. It will all be over pretty quickly, to which she replied, what if it doesn't? If they are taken away? I said, I hope it doesn't come to that, and if it does, it's not on me. I didn't harm them. I didn't leave animal excrement around the house. I asked, would you let your children live the way we lived? She didn't answer. I asked again and she said, no. I'd keep a decent house, but it's not your job to tell someone else how to parent. I said, okay. So, if that's all, why did you call? I think we're done. She told me that we all need to get over what happened to us and move on. She left long before the violence started and she wasn't around, regardless of my personal experience. I can't help but feel like I did something wrong. I have limited contact with my mother because of her husband, and she denies that any of us have ever been abused. My sister asked, why don't you just come in and see the conditions? I told her, I can't be around my stepfather. I refuse to expose myself to this negativity again. Even though my husband and siblings agree that it was the right thing to do, I still can't help feeling wrong because of it. Like it wasn't my place. But if it wasn't my place, then whose was it? I really would like a third-party opinion on what I did. Am I wrong in reporting my family? Honestly, should I have just kept my mouth shut? I don't mind if I don't have any contact with my mom or older sister. They don't even know that I'm almost 4 months pregnant because we don't talk very much. So the possibility that I'll never have a real relationship doesn't bother me. What worries me is that I don't know if I was right. I called my mother's CPS based on previous experiences of psychological and physical abuse by our stepfather. I have not heard anything from my younger brothers and sisters for a long time, because communication was interrupted. We lived in appalling conditions. There were animal feces, rubbish and mess everywhere. We were beaten, things were thrown at us, etc. I told the police that I was not sure if something was going on for sure because, again, no contact. But I wanted them to check on my siblings. Was I completely out of sorts?